Hi there, it's Martin from Robson Laidler here with another update, and we thought we'd just talk through a couple of things this week to let you know what's going on. I'm joined by Jack from the Business Accelerator team. Hi Jack, how you doing?
Hi, Martin. Yeah, good, thanks. Good.
Good. So yeah, Jack's later going to share some thoughts on what he's been working on this week and thinking about. But meanwhile, I'll just give you a quick update on the Restart and Recovery grants. We did something on this last week, and we've also emailed clients to let them know that it's out there. This is the £1,000 to £3,000 grant to spend on various things, mainly professional services. A couple of the areas have gone already, been and gone. I think North Tyneside and South Tyneside have gone. If you're in Tyne and Wear and you haven't seen this, get in touch and we'll let you know more about it. But basically over the next week or so, the different areas are being released. What's interesting though is we've already had people in the areas that have already submitted their ballot requests rejected. So that does beg the question about how they're allocating the funds across the entire region. You know, for instance, they pick 20 people from North Tyneside, ask them for info, they get rejected because they don't qualify, or they're then going to go back to people who'd already submitted ballots. Only time will tell. If you've been successful or rejected, let us have a note in the comments. That'll be great. And meanwhile, I'm going to pass you over to Jack Spoor, who will give you some thoughts on business acceleration. Maybe.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I've been having a bit of a think over the past week, and there's been a lot of talk about recently on business strategy, specifically with COVID in mind. And I just feel like there's probably a bit of confusion out there what business strategy actually is. So I'm kind of sharing with you kind of 4 confusions relating to business strategy. So the first thing is kind of, I don't think everyone is necessarily clear on what business strategy is and what it involves. And I think it's largely because of the word strategy or strategic planning has kind of been hijacked by the business world in general. So the important thing is to distinguish between operational and strategic. Now, operational stuff is kind of working in your business on the day-to-day, while strategic stuff is kind of looking forward. And I'm sure Martin, I know for an example, would probably sat in many a strategic planning meeting and find himself talking a lot about the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, that's right, Jack. It's very easy actually to look at a problem in a business and then end up getting right down to like a minor problem and think that you're actually solving it. Whereas, you know, that detail work needs to be done, but not while you're working on the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very tempting thing to do. The second thing is the idea that a business strategy is the be-all and end-all in the sense that it's the top of the pyramid. I tend to find that ultimately you need something above it tying it all together, such as an end goal or essentially the business's identity. And I will look at end goals in the next part, but if we want to focus specifically on the identity of a business, and we tend to look at Robson Laidler at the idea of having a mission statement and also having defined sustainable competitive advantage. So it's quite easy when you're talking about business strategy in isolation without considering your sustainable competitive advantage, is that it becomes quite disjointed. A lot of strategy policy decisions then can actually be contradictory. I mean, a kind of basic example of it is that if you have a company that has particular values where they want to value the employees that they keep, and then suddenly they start discussing a strategy about outsourcing some of their services out to, you know, offshore, just doesn't tie in whatsoever. So that's the importance of having something above your strategic planning, for something to aim at, which is always quite easily can be ignored.
Yeah, I suppose this is a bit like you could be the fastest runner in the world, but if you're not heading towards a finish line, it doesn't matter. You'll never win a race, will you? So you can have all the strategy you want, but unless you've got a direction, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. It's if the strategic is not heading towards, if you're not aiming for a certain endpoint, then it becomes incredibly difficult to have any kind of successful strategy.
Yeah, makes sense.
The third confusion is generally around planning, and we have a lot of conversations here at Robson Laidler regarding strategy with business owners, and I'd say a large percentage of them do have some kind of strategy, but it's in their own head, and or some kind of informal sort of scrawled on the back of the scrap piece of paper kind of job. But the idea of kind of rolling out that strategy further down the line when you don't necessarily have the buy-in because your employees or people beneath you don't really understand what the end goal is. So it's, yeah, as I said, very hard to get that buy-in. And also another fundamental issue by not having it written down in a formal kind of way is that there's no accountability to that strategic plan that you've pulled together. You can easily just turn on a sixpence and change your strategy straight away. Or if there's certain time deadlines that you put in place for that strategy, suddenly if nobody's there to kind of go, hang on a second, have you done X, Y, and Z, then it almost becomes pointless.
So is that the accountability piece then, Jack? It's point, you know, a plan that isn't written down is just an idea, isn't it? Until it's written down, it's not an actual plan. And equally, if nobody else knows it, how can you hold people to it?
Absolutely. And, you know, we're, again, another thing at RL is that we're massive on kind of getting these plans written down. And we're not necessarily talking about, you know, exhaustive documents here, 200, 300-page business strategic plans, which are very in vogue with larger companies. But for the SME market, we're just looking at simple one-page plans here that, you know, can be very effective as a planning tool and also as a way of driving the business forward. And as you said, yeah, the accountability side of it is so important, and that's something that we're also very keen to kind of get across to our clients, is that they need some accountability, and it's not necessarily easy to get it within the company, and that's when maybe you need to look outside at your accountants perhaps to offer that kind of accountability.
Yeah, okay then, Jack, that's all good.
And basically the fourth and final confusion, in my opinion, is that business strategy needs to take days, weeks, months to kind of hash out. As we mentioned before, you know, people can be sat in these strategy meetings for, you know, a day, and it can easily get hijacked and sidetracked into operational issues. But if you can focus purely on the strategic side of things, then you can actually get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time. So there's a couple of tips within this confusion, I would say, that we can pass on to you. Is first of all is to have an agenda to any strategic meeting. That will prevent people from being sidetracked. It gives the chairman of the meeting an opportunity to kind of really rein people in when they start going too far off topic, so to speak. And structuring that agenda in a way that's suitable for the business in terms of strategy. I know that we've talked previously about the 10 hats that people wear and the 10 departments within every single business. And that's generally a good way of structuring these kind of strategic meetings and focusing on each one of those departments in turn. Second tip there is to kind of, it's very easy to talk about things and discuss things and keep discussing things and keep going. But ultimately there needs to be get from beyond that discussion point and into a decision-making scenario. Because ultimately, if you do lose a bit of time discussing things, it is worthwhile if you actually come out with a decision. There's nothing worse than a meeting you've been in where you've been speaking for 2 hours about the same issue. And ultimately, you kind of sign off that meeting going, well, we'll talk about it next time. I've been in that position before. I'm sure you've been in that position before, Martin, and it is very frustrating.
Absolutely not, Jack. The Robson Laidler team is the pinnacle of efficiency and decision making, as I'm sure you know. It's interesting what you say there about time as well, though, because everyone will argue that they don't have the time. But there's actually some really good things you can do. And I don't know what the official term for it is, but I often draw people what I call a delegation chart. If you imagine you've got the exciting work at the top of the chart and the dull work at the bottom, the high value work on the side and the low value work, they're all low value, dull jobs that often business owners do that could easily be delegated. So a good way to look is, what do you spend your time on? How easy would it be to delegate some of those, often to people who are better equipped to do them anyway? And the next thing on time is, I mentioned in a recent video, I did an interview with one of our clients, and he said it takes 5 hours a week to build a business. That's it. So has everybody, got such a full life that they can't spend that 5 hours a week? I mean, just to put that into context, the time you spent watching Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, and Game of Thrones, you could literally have built a business from scratch. Mm-hmm. So, if you're sitting binging on Netflix, you're not building your business in that time, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really, really good tools that you can use, and you're absolutely right that a lot of business owners do get sidetracked with stuff that, from an external point of view, you have to go, why are you wasting your time doing that? Or when you've got other people in the business who are far better suited for it.
Yeah, that's great, Jack. Anything else?
Yeah, just a couple more tips. The third one is ultimately be disciplined with your choices. There's also the risk of going too far the other way, getting through the decision process quickly, but then you decide to try and fix everything at once, which ultimately isn't feasible. There's going to be a lot of action points coming out of these strategic meetings, and it's not always feasible to get them all done. So another tool that we use is kind of Pareto analysis within our business strategy workshops that we do, where essentially people in the meeting get to pick the 20% of the strategies that will achieve 80% of the benefit. And that's always a good tool of using. And ultimately those other issues that you've highlighted are still going to be there when you're trying to fix the issues that you've picked. And just by picking stuff off systematically, you will see a lot of improvement in your business a lot quicker than trying to fix everything at once.
Yeah. It's about prioritizing the big, quick wins, isn't it? Or the big things that are blocking a lot of other things.
Yeah, definitely. And then the final tip is you need to have action points coming out of these meetings. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how, we can sit there and discuss stuff and nothing comes of it. But having specific action points with, verbs in the action points themselves, an actual doing word, makes so much more difference, and it will actually force the person who's responsible for that action to do something. Again, that's something that ties in really nicely with the one-page plans that we do, is that we have action points for specific strategies, and we also assign that to an individual, and we give them a deadline in terms of time, and it works so well. Just by having having that a bit of accountability, that means that people are more likely to do stuff. And it seems quite simple, but it's amazing how people can really get stuff done when they know that they're expected to do it, rather than knowing that they can palm it off to someone else.
I was just about to say, Jack, people are probably watching this thinking, but Jack hasn't said anything that I didn't already know. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, when you're on the ground in the thick of it, actually putting some of these simple things in place is just often overlooked, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, just the conversations I've had with clients doing this kind of stuff is that the strategies you're coming out with aren't, reinventing the wheel. It's stuff that they know that they needed to do, but it's just having someone there going, well, what's your excuse for not doing it? Just make the time and do it. The benefits of doing it. So what's holding you back? And, they're very responsive to kind of like, well, you haven't really, you've got a good point, really. I don't know why, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. It's great when you say to a client, well, but you can just do that. And they sometimes need the permission or just someone to tell them that they should just get on and do it, really, don't they? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Jack. Thanks very much. And if I can just link that back to the restart and recovery, if anything you've just heard there sounds like, well, actually, I wouldn't mind someone holding my hand, giving us a nudge, and helping us sort out the important issues. If you are successful in the restart and recovery grant ballot, that is something that you could actually spend your money on. This didn't set out to be a shameless pitch, but it just fell there. So hopefully you'll forgive us for that. Final thing I want to mention this week, which is something that seems to be happening, is it's with regards to stamp duty, land tax and property. So depending on where you are in the country at the moment, property is either red hot, there aren't enough properties, or it's a fairly static market. So what you can find is people are often moving house, trying to buy a new home, but they haven't sold their old home yet. And if you've got the earning potential, you could buy the new house without having to sell the old house, which is great. The downside is, of course, the additional stamp duty, land tax that you'll have to pay. So just if you're not sure, there is basically a rule that says if at the end of any given day, you own more residential properties than you did at the start of the day, and it isn't your first primary residence, then you'll have to pay an additional 3% stamp duty on the purchase. So speaking to someone the other day buying a house for £450,000, their current house is £250,000. They haven't sold that. They're going to pay an additional 3% stamp duty on the 450 purchase if they don't sell their old house at the same time. That puts a big strain on the finances of moving house. So we had a discussion about what their options are, and fortunately for this person, they could finance that. And what they're going to do is they're going to wait and see whether their old house works as a let. If it lets, fine, and they make some money on it, they'll keep it. If not, what they've got is an option to sell that within 3 years. And if they do, they'll get a rebate of some of the additional stamp duty they've paid. So just always get the advice there. It's always worth getting advice. And that's it. That's your topical update from me. Thanks again to Jack from our Business Accelerator team for giving us some insight on strategy and how to implement. Have you got any parting words, Jack?
Yeah, always a pleasure. It's lovely to catch up with you like this. Yeah, look forward to taking part going forward. And
if anyone's going to gripe on about the quality of the imagery here, we're working on it. Give us a break. Future videos will look better. But meanwhile, that's it from me and Jack, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.